These sections are there in the Struts-Config.xml. The first one is called as the data sources, which contains the configuration information for the various data sources, in particular the databases that we are going to use. And we have also seen the configuration information depends on the type of the data source that you are using. Usually we specify the driver information that are required in order to connect to the database. The next part is the form bean. Again, I have discussed about the form bean. The form bean contains the data that are supplied by the customer or by the client during the request. So whenever a web page makes a request to the server for registering the students or for inquiry of something, or maybe in your epitome program, the request for verifying the lucky tip number, this data is stored in the form beans. So it contains the data that is supplied by the user during the request. This is where we have stopped, so let me quickly go to that location. Now let's look at what are the things which are there in the form. And this has been already discussed. If you look at the struts configuration, there is a section for the form. So this contains the information. The form bean contains the name of the form and the type of the form. And in the last class, I've told you that you don't have to create a actual Java class like the one that you have created in your exercises, like check ticket number form or registration action form. You don't have to create a Java class in order to create a form. You can use the XML definition itself to dynamically create a form, and such a form is called as the Dyna form. So that is Dyna. The word is used just to specify that it is a dynamic form. And again, in the last class, I have shown you one simple example wherein you can add the properties. More about it in the practicals when we really do the lab exercise on them. So let's look at how we can create a dynamic form. Now this definition is directly added in the struts.configuration. Here you are adding, and I think in the last class I told you it is much easier. If you want to add a property, right click on it and then said I want to set some property. And it's going to ask you what is the name, type, and so on. And I've shown you the example. When you do the real exercise, you'll come to know, you'll get the first-hand experience as to how to create the dynamic form. For now, just an information how to create a dynamic form. First important thing, dynamic forms are usually derived out of a special type of class called as Dyna form. Okay. Then you specify the property and the type. Property and type. How you are doing the getters and setters in your actual form. So when you create a registration form or anything, you create the field and then you specify the getters and setters. For the field, the same thing is done here. However, you don't specify the getters and setter. You just say that there is a property called as student name, there is a property called as places, and so on. Okay, automatically on fly the struts will create a class for you, the class that you might have declared like this, the one that instead of you physically creating this class, it will on fly create a class for you and then populate it with the requested data. So it's much easier if you do that. Okay. And we will see when they are useful in later slides. Then the other part that we have seen is global forwards and local forwards. Again, in the demonstration itself, I have told you there are two places that you get in the Struts-Config. One is this global forward, and the other one is the forward that is not mentioned as local forward, but the forward that are part of the action. So if you get a forward within an action, it is called as a local forward. Why do we have to call it as a local forward? Because this forward is meant only for this the particular action. In particular, the forward is applicable for this action. Okay. Whereas the global forward can be used by any one of them. For example, if the return value is welcome, and you notice here there is no forward for welcome, in that case what will happen is it will be automatically redirected to this place. So that is globally available. And in the last class again, I think as far as I remember, I have told you that global forwards are used when we want to show a one specific page regardless of the action. For example, it could be like you want to show a user registration form or login form or kind of thing. So if the user is not logged in, at any moment of time, if you realize that the user has not logged in, then they have to be sent to a login page which usually accepts a username, password, and the saga continues from there. So regardless of the action, suppose if you feel that if the user is not logged on at any point in any module, if the user is not logged on, you just want to send them to a global location and then start to work from that point. In that case, you specify the forwards here. So we have two types. One is the global forward, and the other one is the local, that is meant only for a given action. Okay. Now let's come to the other part. When we will go for a forward, we are already familiar. Whenever we are using the action within the action, so forwards are usually meant for a view, that is JSP, the final output that we are going to show. In case if you are getting it confused, this is what happens. You have a action. Action has a execute method. That takes some parameters. This method returns a forward, and in particular this method returns the action forward, and this action forward decides where to send. For example, it could be for a JSP page, or it could be one more request. What's the meaning of that? You can chain the process. For example, the request may come for one page. So one action, you start with one action, perform that one action. Usually in the last example or before that, what we did was the output of this action was a JSP page, and that was the end of the process. But that is not the usual condition. Usually what happens is the request comes to one of the action, it performs it, then it changes it to some other action. So it goes like that. So from one action you are going to some other action, that other action will again chain it to something else. So it may chain it to some other thing and so on, and finally the output is given to the user. So you can have that thing. How do we do that thing? You will have to specify the, instead of specifying a JSP page, you have to specify that this is one more action. For example, if you notice here, in this struts.config, it's some other file. It's going to take still more time. So here, let me come back to this. Here, that is test.jsp. The test.jsp means, you know very well, whenever we say .jsp, it's a view. That's the end of the processing. You are going to show the output to the user. Whereas if the output was for test page dot do or take some additional action dot do, you know very well whenever something that ends with the dot do arrives at the servlet, automatically the action servlet is fired and the process will continue from that point. So whenever it is something dot do, it means it's going to go for one more cycle, and the cycle will continue. The entire thing, whatever we are discussing, will continue again and again. Let's look at a simple example. So here we have forward name equal to some name, path is equal to this, and context relative is true. What is again? I think I discussed about this. Context relative is you are saying that this is relative to the current action. So if your current action is here with respect to me, where is the other form? So if I have to specify what is his location, then I will say that on my left side or on your right side, whatever it is. From my left side, first student. So that is relative. So if I stand out and then say from my left side, the first student, there may not be any benches there and nobody is sitting there. So that relative, whenever you say it depends, it's not fixed. What is the fixed or absolute location? Absolute location is if this room number is say 106, 106 room number, the first row and on the left hand side the first position. So you are fixing it regardless of wherever you go. 106 room number will be present that this is 106 is this room and first corner and maybe first row and first location. That is absolute. From wherever you specify, that is absolute. If I say with respect to me, the leftmost thing is if I turn my side and that will be something else. So the context relative is relative to the current context, whereas if you don't specify this, it means to say that it's an absolute context. So you are taking from the root and getting the location. Now let's look at how does these things are taken care within your application. Now here we have the action. Again, it has to take some more time to show me that. So if you look at a action mapping, so if you notice over here, it means to say that this is the other example, the old hello world example that is being shown there. So whatever it is, if you notice over here, if the global forward is for dot do, now what is happening here is the forward is dot JSP. Now if I say that this forward is for something dot do, then what will happen is it is not going to go out to the world, it's going to come back again for the same thing and it will go on repeating it. Or it could be something like perform some more action dot do. So what will happen is after processing, when the welcome is when the value is written back to you, it's not going to be forwarded to a JSP page. Instead of that, it will go to one more servlet. I mean, one more action. From one action, it will go to next action. From next action, it will go to next action, and finally, somewhere it's going to skip out of the struts, and it will go to the external world. So, in terms of your example that you are already done in the lab, what is the difference? Now we have some forwards here, and you will notice that if you are lucky, if it is successful, so if you are lucky, you are going to lucky.jsp. If you are unlucky, you are going to unlucky.jsp. Instead of that, I can say that if you are unlucky, then I can then say that go to test luck again dot do. Okay. So it will go to some other servlet. Definitely, I cannot just do this one. I have to write one more action that will be forwarded to. So I have to specify. For example, when does this gets activated? When somebody says check ticket action dot form, then this action will be executed. For example, in my case, I said there is this welcome struts.jsp. In that welcome struts.jsp, there was one form. Just recall what you have done. Okay. There was one form, and that form said that action is check result. So if this is check result, then it will, where is the check result? It will come to so this is the place. It will come to this place, check result, and this will be executed. Now what I am saying is, if you are unlucky, then you must go to some other one. If I try to run this, I will get an error message. The reason is I don't have a mapping for that thing. So if I have to correct this thing, then I have to specify that if the request is for this, not for if the result, if the request is like this, then take it. I will zoom it out so that I will be able to see that thing. So what I am saying is, if you are unlucky, then you are not going to show the JSP page. Instead, you are going to call one more action. So it is not complete, definitely. You are going to call one more action, and this action, if you notice here, this action will be executed when the path is test your luck again. So it's going to come from here to this action. So that means you are chaining. Now what has happened is, even though I have not completed, but at least you can get the idea of what is going on. So from here, from one place, what is happening is you are going to the next action. And maybe from here you may go to some one more action, and so on, and finally you may go out of the page altogether. So you can chain them altogether. That is the summary of it. Okay, so let me go to the next one. What are the things that you are supposed to specify in the action forward? First is the path from where you are getting the request. The next one is the type, the class that is responsible, and the last one is the scope. There are two types of scopes are there. One is the session, other one is the request scope. One simple example that has been shown over here. Again, I think you are already familiar by now. If the action path is network event, then the one that is going to handle is event action dot some action. Some class is going to handle it. The scope of it is a request. Then the output of this is a action. There is a dot execute method inside this. That dot execute method, if it returns a value called as event view, then you will take it to the network event page.jsp. So when you call this action, this is the name of the action that contains that dot execute method. When that dot execute method is called, if the output is event view, then it has to go to one page. It could be somewhere else. So instead of a page, if you do it to dot do, that means it's going to go for one more action. So that is how it goes. Let's look at one more example so that it is much easier now. I hope you will be able to see that thing. So we have the path is, if it is add book, then it's going to go to a class called as add input action dot class. This is the Java class that you are writing. Remember, this is the one that is here, the class that you have created. So when you said add new action form, so this is what you have said, add new and you went to others, or because it's a new installation I won't get it there. So you went here to this struts, and you have this action. This is the one that I'm talking about, this class. That's the class that I'm talking about. So here, that's a class. That class has dot execute method. So this dot execute method will be executed. After that, it will return either go or cancel. So something it is going to return. For example, when you wrote your class, I will cancel this thing. It's not really required. When you wrote like check ticket action number dot action, there was this execute method. There was this execute method which was there. It was returning a value action forward. So you did something, and finally you were returning some value, either lucky or unlucky or something. You're going to return something out of here. So that return is going to decide what action has to be taken. So if that return is go, then you will forward it to result.jsp. That return is cancel, then you will return it to index.html, or it could be anything else. So this is the name, this is what is returned. Remember that string is not returned. When you look at here, this lucky is a string that is not returned. What is returned is a object of type action mapping. So this is not returning that string. That string is inside that object. So that action forward object contains that string. Let's go to the next one. And the next one is the control configuration. We don't have much thing to talk about here in this control configuration. The reason is this is configuring the struts itself. We usually don't venture, as when I say we, as a developer, you may not venture into configuring the struts itself. It's a duty of the administrators who will do some settings to the controller. Usually we don't venture into it. These are the control information that the action servlet is supposed to take. Now there are two ways in which you can configure it, if at all you want to do it. One is using the global method, and the global method is going to web.xml. Let me recall again. Web.xml is the general configuration information that is applicable to any web application, that is any Java web application. It has nothing to do with struts or springs or any other framework that you can think of. This is the general information. You have a section for servlet here that can be used to control the information. Now this information, if you are doing it, it is like a global level. You are configuring it for the entire application. But if you want to configure it for a struts alone, the servlet within the struts alone, then you will have to go for this section, that is the controller section. Okay. These are internals and we don't generally venture into it. One of the things that you may see here is who is going to perform the request processing. Now I'll talk about this request processing. I have not discussed about it. I've told you that the action servlet is the main servlet that is going to perform each and everything, but it is not true. Action servlet will not perform everything. It actually delegates it to request processor. There is one more class that is responsible. In the diagram that I've shown you, I won't go back because the system is slow now. In the diagram that I've shown you before, you might have observed that when there was this big block was there, and there was this action servlet was there, and I told you that the request is going to come here, and in between there was one small block that I have not discussed, and most of the time I was discussing about a block that was here, and that I called it as action form. And I told you that the action servlet populates this action form, then calls the action, but in between there was something and that something is the request processing. Again, that diagram will come somewhere else. I will show you that diagram slightly later when I discuss about the request processor. Now, what are the things that you can control here? Because you are controlling the servlet, you can say what is the size of the buffer. So input size buffer, that is 4K, or what type of content that you are getting, or what is your default locale. Locale is the country and region specific information. You can configure it. What is the maximum size of the file that can be uploaded? Who is supposed to handle the processing, or which is the temporary directory that should be used? By now you will get it. This is, you are trying to configure the servlet itself, what it can do in general. Okay, so this, again, there are many other things which are there. Let's go to the next one, and that is the message resource definition. Now this has to do with the messages. Now, what are messages? Again, let's recall, we have already used that. Unknowingly or knowingly, we have used that information. When we created our servlet, we had a separate file called as properties. And let's recall what we have done in that properties. In that properties, we said these things. You have won a DVD, you have lucky result, and so on. This is the message that I am talking about. Okay, so the messages refers to this section. How do you handle that section here? Now this, why, again I told you, why do you have to do that, write it in a message? When I discussed about the Android, I told you why you have to use a message bundle. The reason is for the internationalization. Suppose if you want the same message to be shown in different language for different countries, then you are not going to recode the entire forms again. Instead, you are going to create the message bundle that you have created in English. The same kind of message bundle you are going to create it in French, Chinese, or some other country, and you are going to just shift the message property bundle to that. So instead of using the English version of the messages, you are going to say use the Chinese version. The rest of the program or the rest of the application will work seamlessly without making any modification. And that's the reason why we are going for the message bundles. Anytime if you want to go for internationalization, you can do that thing. So if you have written a program that that can be used by the schools in Karnataka, then you can configure it to show the messages in Kannada. Suppose if you want to market the same product in Kerala, then you can change the message bundle and write all the messages in the Malayalam, and then show that message to them. Tomorrow if you are marketing it in Tamil Nadu, just put one more message bundle and write all the messages in Tamil, and your application, you are not just you are not doing anything. You are not hiring a new developer. You are just hiring a person who knows how to translate between English and Tamil. That's all. You just ask them what is the equivalent of this word in Tamil and type that in Tamil. That person will type it in Tamil. Just copy paste it here, and it's all done. Your application is going to work. It's going to show every message in Tamil. That's the reason we are going, and that is what is called as internationalization. The shortcut for it is I18N. So a short form of writing it. I for enter, that is 18 is writing there. Internationalization, that is N. I and 18 and N. There are 18 characters are there. I think that's why they are doing it. Internationalization. Okay. So this is the general format. If people don't say internationalization, they will say I18 format. I18 refers to internationalization. Okay. How do we specify that in our struts configuration? In this struts.config, have it, come on. Here, one of the section is meant for the messaging, and in this case, you will notice that the message is pointing to com.app struts application resource. And where is that com.struts and application resource? And this is what it is trying to go, com.myapp struts application resource. So it's going to say that you are going to get the resources in this location. That's what you are supposed to specify. So if you are using other type of resources, other type of the resource bundle, put that information here. So if it is for Tamil, specify which is the file that contains the Tamil equivalent word in the struts configuration. Now, when we are using the error message, or when we are using the resources from the messages from the different bundles, we have to tell either the error messages or the bean messages that you are supposed to get this message from the other. For example, you can show some messages in English, some messages in Kannada. That means you can pick some from one resource file, that is message file, the other from the other message file. Then you can show them together in a page. It's not that entire page has to be rendered using only one message bundle. You can selectively pick the messages from different one. How do you do that thing? How do you specify that the message must come from the different place? The way in which you do it is by specifying the key attribute. For example, I will just show you an example here that will make the things clearer. So let's assume that you have two message bundle. One is the application resource. That's the one that we have it here. So the main one that we are using with all the messages, the one that we have used for the lucky draw. Similarly, assume that you have one more file. The same structure is same. You are just specifying key value format. It's just a XML file that has the detail. Let's assume that you have one more resource file with the name validation messages. One more. Okay. And you want to use them in your error message. Suppose say if you want to show error message of a particular type, how do you specify that thing? In your error message, suppose say if you are writing this HTML errors, you have to specify which is the bundle that you are using. When you say HTML errors, bundle is validator, that means to say that you are getting it from the other file. Okay, so this is the default file. So if you just specify HTML error in our last example, when we did something on a JSP page, for example, when we did this welcome JSP, here we try to show some error message. For example, here we have shown some error message. Now I have not specified anything regarding the bundle. If I specify that there is a bundle, okay, I think I will type that rather than making it then say, isn't that I have created the reference there. So it's going to take it from the Tamil. Remember, this is not the name of the file. This is not the name of the file. The name of the file will be different. So when you look at here, you notice the name of the file is application resources dash something or validation messages dot something. It is referred with a key called as validator. So if you notice here, HTML errors bundle is validated. So that's a name. This is the actual file name. This is it's like a reference name that is given to it. So you are just using the reference name, not the actual file name. So when you say bundle equal to validator, it doesn't mean that it's actually the name of the file. Name of the file will be something else. Okay, so what are the things which are there? Apart from this, what else you can specify? You can specify the key, and you can, this is not usually required. Who is going to use the configuration information? We don't change it unless and otherwise you really want to dig deep into struts and make changes to the actual architecture of the struts. These are not really required. What is required is the parameter name and the escape sequence that you are supposed to use it, or the null to be used in place of a key. Now what is this question mark key name is if the particular message is not found. For example, suppose say when you typed it in Tamil, that person or the person who typed it in Tamil has somehow missed the this particular line. So first prize, this line is not there in Tamil. So when your application is run, what will happen is that key is not there in the Tamil. Let's assume that by mistake that key was deleted from the Tamil. So when they use the Tamil, what will happen is instead of the message, it will start showing you like this: question mark key name. So it just says that I can't get the key value there. It's not there in the resource. So if you don't want to confuse your user with this name, you can just say null equal to true. That means to say that if the key is not found, don't show unnecessary this kind of messages. Just leave it as blank. So in that case, what will happen is nothing will be shown to the user. So otherwise, what will happen is the user may get confused. Now, why do you have to? Why then that thing is there is when you are debugging your program or when you are testing your program, definitely you would like to know whether every keys are being shown up. You are writing the application, you know the logic, but the people from the testing department may not be knowing what messages will come when they type something. So if the messages are not coming properly, if some keys are missing, they would like to know whether some keys are missing. So this is the highlight for them, saying that some key is missing. So when you say null equal to true, that means to say that you want to show null. If it is not, you are just saying that show that thing to the at least to the people who are testing your application. The next part, I think I discussed about this. The next one is the plugin. We have not used any plugin so far. There are by default there are two plugins are available. One is the tile plugin and the other one is the validator plugin. Okay. This plugin has to are using one or other Java classes, and you need to specify the valid name of the class that makes use of the plugin. How do you do that thing? You have to specify the class name. It's required whenever you use the plugin, you have to specify which plugin is responsible. Even though we have not used the plugin, and I think I have already told you, tiles plugin is used to create small tiles which can be fitted across any pages. This plugin is already there. I didn't want it you to get confused with the thing, so I have not used the tiles plugin in my application. The demo that I've shown you, I have not used it here. If you look at your struts.configuration, at the end of that struts.config, these two are already there. So you get this tiles plugin, you get the validator plugin. It's already there in place. It's coming. These two plugins are part of the struts, but we have not made use of it. You will notice that what is specified here is some property regarding where are the definitions for this or what are the settings those particular plugins must use. You will notice that it is pointing to a web config, a location called as web config. If you go to your project and under web config, you might have observed there is a definition for tiles def. This is the configuration that the tiles plugin is making use of. It's going to say tilesdef.xml. If you open up that, I have not used it. Somewhere when I give you the demo, I'm going to make use of this piece. As of now, it is rolled out, and you will notice that they have remarked this entire thing definition, and there is a definition for the title, header, menu, footer. I told you tiles are nothing but small pieces which can be fitted in different places. This is a sample that they have shown you how you are supposed to write it. So this is not activated because it is remarked out. So it's a remark statement that they will tell you how to write it, and at the end they are telling you that you are supposed to write your definition here. You have not used the tiles plugin, that is why nothing happened. You didn't get any error message because by default you are not supposed to use it. If you want, you can use it, and that is true even for the validator. The one more plugin, definitely what is the validator plugin? The word itself tells you that validator plugins are used for doing a simple validation. Suppose say you want to validate whether the email that is typed by the user is valid email or not. How do I say that a email is valid? If an email is valid, it must have some word and it must have a at symbol and something and a dot followed by something. So there must be a at symbol inside it and there must be a dot inside it, one or more dot inside it. That is how you check the email. Now, instead of you writing the entire routine for verifying the email, there is this validator plugin that has the rules built into it. You can look at the rules. They have already created it. I have again not used the validator plugin, and they have given you all the details about how to use it. And you notice the maximum length, the minimum length, the how to verify each and every. These are how to verify the different things. Somewhere you will going to see the end, how to verify the date. It's already there, so you don't have to use it, and we are going to use it. For example, if you want to validate the email, this will take care of that email section. So this is the configuration information for that plugin. It may not make any sense to you, but this information is meant for the email validation of that validator plugin. So they have many things, and you can add and delete. There are a lot of instructions here at the top that will tell you how to use it and what you can do with the default validators. So these are the plugins that you can think of using with your Struts. That ends the configuration information, and definitely you can expect a question on this particular piece of Struts, which is very important. That is, explain the various sections in the Struts-Config.xml with the example or without example, depending upon the marks that are allotted to it. Now let's look at each and every piece of these Struts. We have seen the main piece of Struts, and that is the action servlet. Now let's look at the other important piece of Struts, and that is the action. So let's look at the action in detail. Before we venture into action, let's recall how these Struts work. Remember, you have to know this procedure in order to appreciate what is going on in Struts. That's extremely important. In Struts, what is happening right at the beginning? When you start the controller reads the struts.config. I hope you will be able to see that thing, struts.config. Right when the application loads, it reads the struts.config, and it's going to create the mappings based on what are the informations which are there in this struts.config, so that it knows what are the possible input requests, what are the possible actions that it is supposed to take, and what are the different beans, form beans that it is supposed to use it during the processing, and where it is supposed to forward the output. So this information is known to the controller right at the beginning. So it's going to load it during the initialization. So then what happens? Once the controller is initialized, this is the client base, this is your Struts space, and this is your business logic. Again, I told you, so you have the views here, you have the controller here, you have the model here, and again, let me recall, model has nothing to do with the Struts. Model is your business logic is yours. Struts will not come in your way when you write the business logic. Struts will only help you to activate an appropriate business logic depending upon the input request. Now, once it has created the mapping, then let's assume that a user makes a request, and you know very well the request is first, if you want the Struts to handle it, the request has to be given to the controller. So the user makes a request and it comes to the controller. What the controller will do, it will check the mapping here. It has the list of possible request from the user. So it checks the path to find out which is the form and which is the action that can handle this particular request. So it checks the mapping. Once it gets the appropriate mapping, it then decides whether for this particular action is there any input request. So you may have an input request or you may not have an input request. Let's assume that there are some input parameters that are passed along with the request. Now it checks this action and it checks which bean can hold the, or which form can hold the input request. If there is a input request and if it is supposed to use a form, then it goes to the form and it instantiates a form bean. If it is not instantiated, if it is already instantiated, it will rewrite or overwrite the values which are there in the form. Once it has created the form, it will then select and that is it's going to populate the form. Once it has done that thing, it will select an appropriate action. So either input request, input parameters or input values are placed in one of the appropriate form, then it decides, remember it has this mapping that tells which is the action that it is supposed to take. From among the different actions, it's going to call one of the appropriate action that can handle the request. Now once that thing goes to the action, then action will fire that dot execute method. Remember, dot execute method is the starting point of your business logic. So this action is the one that interacts with the your model or your business logic. It calls one or more business procedure or business methods that in turn may go to the database, retrieve some value from the database, update some value. It's up to the business logic or business layer to perform that business logic. So during this time, your struts is not there in picture. Once this action dot execute is called, you are taking the control to the business layer. You instantiate many business objects. You make a connection with the database. You do anything with the business. That's not the problem of the struts. But at the end, it has to return a action forward back to the controller. So end of this action, it has to return after doing everything, after performing all the business logic. The last thing that dot execute method is supposed to do is return a action forward. Once that action forward is returned back, it goes to the controller. Now the controller gets the forward. It has already made note of which are the possible forwards. So it looks at the forward, it has this mapping, and correspondingly it takes one of the either the action or one of the JSP page that is supposed to be shown to the user. So it picks one of them and then it asks that particular page to render itself. This is a JSP page. Okay, so it will call a relevant JSP page and it will ask you are supposed to show the result. Now this JSP page may pick up some value from here or it may pick up some value from the business layer to show some values back to the user. So JSP renders itself, processes, fills all the values dynamically, taking the values from the either from the form bean or from the beans which are created during the business logic. You might have generated some class or some objects that may be floating around here which have the relevant values. So it picks up all those values, put them in the JSP or in an HTML format and then returns it back to the client browser, and this is what happens. Now let's look at this part, and that is the action. So we are at the action now because we have talked many things about the controller, we have talked many things about the configuration. Now let's look at what is the action. Remember, action is the one that performs your business logic. Okay. If it is a very small business logic, for example, we have done trying to find whether you are luckiest or not. or with doing some small business operations, you can directly write the methods in the execute method. So I've shown you that dot execute method. Here somewhere you have a dot action. So here you can write a small business logic. However, according to the people at this Struts, they are strictly saying that you are not supposed to get your business logic here in this execute method. Execute method is supposed to take the control to the business layer, and it is supposed to that business layer is supposed to do all the work. Why can't let me go back to the previous one. Why can't you just put the business logic here? Why do you have to go to the other layer? The reason is, if you put your business logic in the action, that means you are mixing the business logic with the logic of the Struts. Tomorrow, if you feel that, for some reason, if you feel that Struts is not a good framework and I want to get rid of Struts and I want to use JSF, or I want to use Spring, or I want to use some XYZ framework which is very famous in future days. In that case, what will happen is, because you have tied your business logic with these Struts, you will not be easily able to pull out the Struts from your application and put something onto it. Okay, so then what will you have to do is, you have to come here, make changes to the action, make all the necessary adjustment, debug it, and do everything. So it is always advisable, keep, even if it is a very small thing, keep the business logic out of the Struts, keep it in a separate place. But when you are writing your exam, for the practical exam or for other things, instead of making it too complicated, you can directly write the business logic inside the dot execute method. It's not wrong, but it is not advisable. Okay, but what is the good technique? Good technique is just call Vanamur business logic. Okay, so what are the other thing that it is going to do? So this is the diagram. I think I've already shown you. Your control comes to the action servlet. It looks up the Struts-Config. You call the action. Action goes, does something with the business layer. It returns the action forward. So that is what is the important thing. Let me show that thing here. Very important thing. You are somehow creating something called as mapping dot find forward, or find something. What was this mapping? If you recall here, mapping was a object of type action mapping. It was this action forward is a object that is created out of this action mapping. Now you can create like this. You can create in this way, or you can say that action mapping, just give me now. What I am trying to do is, I am creating an object of this type. Okay. Then I don't know what is wrong with that. It is saving. In that time, it is trying to save something. Okay, whatever it is. So I created a object of type action mapping. So AP. Then I have not provided everything. Then I can say AP dot create a string. Okay. Find the same thing. I'm going to get it. You can get that. Find. I think you get that. Find forward and get the string. What is the difference between this one and writing this? What's the difference between these two things? Here you are separately creating a action mapping object. You are creating an action mapping object. What about the other one? In the previous case, somebody else has already provided you with that. What is the meaning of this? When you created, when this action servlet activates the action, it actually goes to this struts.config, gets that mapping. I've told you about the configuration information. It takes that mapping information which is there in the struts config. So it goes here. What is that? So it goes here. It takes up this mapping information. It creates a object for this. Remember, it is all Java. You can't use the XML inside Java. So it creates an object to represent this mapping, and that information is supplied to the execute method. So when action servlet calls this action method, it is already supplying the action a mapping information, and that is what is, what is that? That is what is this mapping. So that mapping that you are getting in the execute method is the one that is already pre-created, pre-populated by the controller and given to you. What about this one? This is, you are saying that I am not happy with the mapping. I have a very different mapping. Is it allowed? Perfectly allowed. If you say that I don't want to use that mapping that was provided to me, but I want to use some other mapping, because of my logic I know that that mapping will not work now, I want to use something else, you are free to do it. So either you can create your own mapping inside that execute method, or use the mapping of the that is provided to you in the execute method by the controller, then create the action forward out of it. In any case, you are going to use it. Now the next part is, how do you create this action? Action is a object, or it's a class that is derived from a other class called as struts.action.action, which is already created and given to you by struts team. Struts team has already created that class and given to you. You are supposed to extend your classes out of this action class that is provided to you. This class will come with the libraries of struts. So when you say, when you create your struts project, you said use the struts project. Immediately it adds all the library that contains this action. The action has the action mapping. That means it is making use of an object called as action mapping. And what is the important method in that action mapping? Find forward is a method. Find forward returns a action forward. And what are the other things that it has? It also takes up a action form, the form that is populated. It has the action, it returns the action forward, and it also has the HTTP request and HTTP response. You are generating the actions out of the existing action. For example, you can say that register action, are you lucky action, do the process verification action, any action. Your actions are extending out of the actions which are already there. For example, the action that you have created in ticket action notification, it extends out of this action class. This class is already there with the struts. So if you try to navigate to the source of it, you won't get it in the binary format. You won't get it in the coded format because it is in the byte format. So you may not be able to see the actual file as such. If you navigate, and it will show you the entire class with all the methods. That's all. The actual code will not be shown. So there is a class called as action. you are deriving it out of that. Okay, so you have execute method. It's a compiled code. It will say that I can show you the compiled version of the code. So this is the compiled code, which is already there. If you try to open it up, you will see it, the bytecode version of Java, and because it says, the NetBeans says I can go beyond this. I can show it like a Java code. Then how does it knows that those methods are there? This is done by an introspection, and that technique is called as reflection. Somebody can ask you a question, what is a reflection? Reflection is a way in which you try to probe into an existing class, a object or a class is given to you. At runtime, you go and try to pick up what is there inside that class. It's a technique that is being used up. I hope, I wish that that was being discussed to you in the last semester during the core Java. It is not my part to explain how do you get that thing out, but you really require it whenever you write a component, or whenever you are in component modeling. Now, what are the things that the execute method takes? It takes the action mapping that contains the information in this Struts-Config. It has an action form that is pre-populated by all the request parameter, and a validate method is called on it. It has the request and the response, and it returns a action forward. The action forward is used to send the request to the user, either using the forward method or using the redirect method. I will complete with this small diagram. So how does it goes? You get the request to the action mapping. So how does the thing work? When you get the request to the controller checks whether there is a form that is associated with the request. If there is, it creates a form and then it populates the form with the request values. Immediately it will not use those values. If you have asked the form to validate the input parameters, you can call the validate method. This method, either you are supposed to write the validation here, and the validations are not hi-fi validation. These are only whether the value exists or whether the values are proper or whether it is null. In the previous case, we have just checked whether it is null or the length is less than 1, or this kind of things we have done. So this is a simple validation. After validating, the controller checks, is there a error object that is written out of it. If there is a error, it immediately sends the error back to the calling page and displays the error to the user. If there is no error, it then calls the execute method on the action form. Suppose there is execute method on the action. Suppose there was no action form, then this step is not taken. Instead, it will just call an execute method. The execute method will do the needful thing and finally dispatches